Here is the Prime Minister of Australia.
As long as they don't touch Mad as Hell, I'm happy.
Thank you very much. Well, good news this week for those who believe our democratically elected government should have those we voted for running it, with some of our elected officials actually turning up for work. So let's show them our appreciation. There are some new rules, though. Politicians have been asked not to bring staff unless it's absolutely essential. In other words, if you're someone like Richard Colbeck and you don't know how to turn down the colour saturation on your computer. They're also not allowed to congregate in groups, socialise and have meetings with external people, like lobbyists and former politicians, who, it must be said, are usually the same people. As if this wasn't enough, our politicians have also been warned not to go to shops, restaurants, cafes, aged care homes, hospitals or jail. So they're not allowed to have any fun. Although I don't think staying away from aged care homes will be much of an imposition for Richard Colbeck, because without his staffers there to tell him, there's a good chance he doesn't even know he's Minister for Aged Care. All in all, though, it's good to have them back, and even though only about half of them will be there because of Queensland's hard border closure and the 2-week quarantine for Victorians, with nothing else to do, they should get twice as much work done. Now, the other really good news this week is that we don't have to worry anymore about coronavirus outbreaks in aged care and how that might reflect badly on the federal government, because we're going to get a vaccine. Our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has made it very clear that it will be
manufactured here in Australia, distributed free to 25 million Australians.
Amazing, isn't it? We're actually going to manufacture something. I think that deserves another round of applause. Now, sorry, Scott, I interrupted. You were saying?
Today's a day of hope, and Australia needs hope, the world needs hope.
And I'm pleased to say the Labor Party has embraced the PM's message of hope in, I think, a refreshing and welcome display of bipartisanship.
He has no vaccine. No agreement has been signed, no deal entered into, no access secured.
Typical Labor. Chris Bowen goes on, you know, the way he does.
The government was ready to go with a meme. They just don't have an agreement.
All right, so let's call it an amendment. But when do we get the vaccine mentioned in the amendment, and how? Early reports suggested we were likely to face mandatory vaccinations. But people like Pauline Hanson, and when I say people like Pauline Hanson, I obviously do not mean that literally. I mean, we like her because she gives us good material. Like this clip where she explains her view as to why the government has no right to mandate vaccinations.
You have no right to say, I have to have this vaccination, because I tell you what, I won't be having it.
It's a compelling argument, and one that can't be dismissed out of hand because she knows what she's talking about.
COVID-19 is a virus. I understand. I get it.
And if Pauline Hanson does get the virus, she's got a battle with the Prime Minister on her hands, because
I have a pretty strong view on vaccines, being the Social Services Minister that introduced no jab, no play.
Yeah. No jab, no play. I assume he means that if you don't get inoculated, he won't be doing this. Which would be a great pity. Fortunately, the PM has softened his rhetoric.
He now says it would be strongly encouraged and has left open the possibility of imposing penalties for those who refuse it. Penalties
such as contracting COVID-19. And it's fair enough not to make it compulsory, because as the PM concedes...
I mean, we can't hold someone down and make them take it.
Yeah, because once again, they don't have the equipment. Hopefully Twiggy Forrest can pull some strings and get some restraints sent over from China. Well, coming up, sharks. They've had a rough trot lately, what with this man punching a great white till it let go of his wife, and this man biting a Cronulla shark until it let go of him. There's not much point banning the handshake at the end of the game if this is going on, is there? Also coming up in sport...
Australian long-distance swimmer Chloe Micallef has set a new record with her 35th successful swim from England to France across the Channel.
Come on, 35 times? Just let the poor girl live in France. Plus, Australia dumping wine in China. China launches an investigation into just what's happening with Australian wine exports. It's a ridiculous claim because if Australians are going to dump alcohol anywhere, it's going to be down their own throats. Later on, I talked to Blam Curley from the Business Council of Australia about this warning from the Chinese ambassador.
So it's up to the people to decide. Maybe the ordinary people will see why should we drink Australian wine, eat Australian beef.
Yeah? Well, why should we use cheap Chinese labour? Maybe the people will say, why don't we use local, though vastly more expensive Aussie labour? Right, Blam? OK. Anyway, that sort of terrified Craven rolling over coming up later on. Still, it's not just our wine, agriculture, textile and manufacturing industries, retail, hospitality, entertainment and education sectors that are cactused. If our tourism industry is to survive, it will require, at least in the short term, that Australia visit itself. Is that an appealing prospect tomorrow happenstance from Tourism Australia, given the borders aren't open for everybody? Some places require 2 weeks isolation, so many businesses are closed and no one's got any money anyway.
Oh, sounds like you need a holiday, Shaun. Where the fucking heck are you? In your house? Get out of there and into a depressed regional community and buy some hand-knitted toilet roll covers, you bastards.
Well, that's a catchy slogan.
Yeah, well, we don't have to translate it for overseas tourists, Shaun, because they can't come here, which is good news for our bottom line and for the rest of us who are racists.
Yes, it's a hard sell, though, isn't it, Tamara?
Well, if you've got to spend that $76 million tourist recovery package on something, Shaun.
Our Tourism Minister, Simon Birmingham, says it's about deluding ourselves. He reckons that we should
get out there and pretend that you're overseas and do the types of things you would do overseas whilst travelling around Australia.
That's right, Shaun. Running out of money, not being able to get a job, having to use your passport to get over the border. Most of us are doing that anyway, so chuck another prawn on the hot plate and invite no more than 10 people over to stay in a nearby hotel unless you're in Victoria, in which case you can only invite your intimate partner over. Either way, get it into you asshole!
Isn't this just the government throwing away good money after bad? Because Qantas, for example, has lost $2.7 billion in the year to June, despite approximately $500 million in government support.
No, I'm with Qantas CEO Alan Joyce on this one, Shaun. He wants the borders reopened, and even if the planes are not allowed to land, I reckon people should just still get on board, fly around the country, have a look out the window at stuff, and then turn around and land where they took off. If getting there's half the fun, then having to go back the same distance as the other half, you turd.
Well, thank you very much for coming in, Tamara, and for coming in, please accept, to commemorate Scott Morrison's announcement about the vaccine, this federal government COVID-free guaranteed mug, repurposed from last year's Back in Black one.
Get that into ya.
Yes, indeed. Well, still, the government has to live within its means, just like we do. And just like the government, if a household has too much debt, the family will balance their budget by simply printing more money. But what if the government isn't hip to modern monetary policy? Well, they need to cut expenditure. And exactly what we should trim, though, is a topic best explained by Tosh Greenslade in a wig and glasses.
That's exactly right, Shaun. People alive in 1901, the ABC's core demographic, would well remember the Federation of Australia. But since then, many have asked whether we have one level of government too many. And with the National Cabinet getting the states talking to each other, it may be time to cut out the expensive middleman and the federal government he leads. Abolishing the federal government would reduce the number of elections people have to vote in, the parliament houses children have to pretend to be interested in on excursions, and the number of political parties that vested interests have to donate to. The simplest solution would be for the federal government to file for bankruptcy, thus wiping our debts from this crisis and all the pensions we pay to our hundreds of living former Prime Ministers. And for the federal politicians, no sitting days would only be a few less than they currently have. But if we abolish the federal government, who will take credit when things go well? Well, that will be distributed in the same way as the GST, with the greediest states getting the biggest proportion. Then finally, we can return to the 6 colonies we once were, bulldoze Canberra and move forward as a fairer, leaner and, above all, more cost-effective nation. Shaun.
Thank you, Tosh. Tosh Greenslade there in a wig and glasses, wondering aloud whether the whole of federal parliament is as pointless as the Senate. Thank you very much indeed, Tosh. Yeah. Of course, while it's true that we're all in this together, it's equally true that we aren't. A recent report has found the impact of the coronavirus to be gender-specific, with women experiencing a gender disaster of job losses and that their unemployment rate is at least 2 points higher than men's. Thought sphincter for Liberty Iron, a free market economics group, Chamomile Splash, are we seeing a gendered recession?
Oh, Shaun, it's ridiculous. You know, on the one hand, when women get paid a lower percentage than men, and that's awful, no doubt about it. But then when they get a higher percentage of the unemployment queue, that's awful as well. I mean, shouldn't we be celebrating this win? Women, hey?
What about the suggestion in the report of a two-lane road to recovery with a fast track for men and a slow lane to nowhere for women?
Yes, well, public infrastructure spending might help with the recovery, Shaun, but I ask you, in what world would any government build a two-lane road with both lanes going in the same direction, with one lane ending up at a six-figure salary in the CBD plus a Tempranillo at Friday night drinks, and the other one veering off into a dead end somewhere with everyone huffing hand sanitizer and singing Piano Man in the Gutter?
Granted, but either way, the women are still going slower along the road than men.
Well, if they are, presumably that's because even in this metaphor, women can't drive properly.
Chamomile splash there, traitor to her gender.
Oh, can I say hi to John Roscombe at the IPA?
Yeah, sure.
OK, great. John, hey, I'm on the team.
Coming up after the break, stage and screen legend Robin Nevin is our celebrity victim for surprise crockett bush, and Francis pushes Stephen through a plate glass window. And now we have a we have a question from the audience left over from Monday night's Q&A. Yes, gentleman with the carnation.
It's not too much?
No, it's fine.
Well, look, I'd just like to say...
Sorry, this... pardon me for interrupting. This does have to be in the form of a question.
Really? Have you ever watched Q&A?
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, I'd just like to say, when is the government going to reopen the economy to allow people like me who've lost their job thanks to this pandemic to get back into employment? I mean, JobKeeper and JobSeeker only support people employed by businesses.
And what do you do?
Well, I lobby on behalf of them. And it's pretty hard to get a gig arguing for lower business taxes at a time when businesses aren't paying any.
Well, what about the mining industry or News Corp?
I don't want to work for the government, Shaun. I want big business to open up again. I want to be able to go on TV and argue on behalf of businesses like travel agents, restaurants and airlines that'd benefit from the economy opening up.
Sounds a bit self-interested.
Well, what if I went on TV and argued on behalf of businesses like Coles, Uber Eats and IKEA that'd benefit from the economy staying closed?
Well, that's an interesting question.
And if you think you know the answer, send your entries to this address and you could be in the running to win some Margaret Throsby Grosbys. Do your feet a favour and pull on a pair of your favourite classic FM concert presenter. That's nice.
She's back. And like most of Australia, she's not happy.
Enid! How is that royal commission into fire I asked you to mount before the COVID crisis coming along?
It's not quite done, my dread lord. The kids are home on ice, so the internet's fucked and Roz is busy doing the heights.
Roz?
Roz Hammond. She plays Enid, but she's left the series, so I have to do her part and mine.
Didn't I see her last season playing Dolly Norman in the final episode?
That was more of a cameo.
Enough! These ad parodies are difficult enough to follow as it is, without this additional layer of deconstructive self-awareness.
You're telling me. I mean, these guys probably don't even remember what we're parodying.
I'm not...
Janet King finished in bloody 2017.
Silence!
If a woman's work is never done, it's because man made the mess.
Sorry to bother you, Your Imperial Majesty. It's Cindy's birthday today and we wondered if you wanted to sign her card.
Can't you see I'm busy?
We don't put money in. We're not doing a present.
Oh, all right.
Giving the finger to laying the blame.
I couldn't think of anything, so I just put happy birthday from Darth Sidious.
Enid?
Nah, fuck that shit.
And I want that report on my desk by close of play first thing tomorrow evening at the earliest. And Enid, make sure the PM is completely exonerated and the Greens and arsonists get the blame.
Enid Swink, returning back shortly.
Welcome back. People who need people are, according to the old song, the luckiest people in the world. But that song is wrong. So wrong that it can't be sung on stage in front of an audience anymore by the very people who need the people who are banned from gathering and listening to it in large numbers. The people who need people, those who work in the arts sector, are, it seems, the unluckiest people in the world, at least to hear them whinge about it. But Mad as Hell's Mad as Help program is here to support the arts industry in this country by presenting another in our series of news stories that's not been adequately dealt with because COVID-19 has distracted us from it. It's called How Much Did the Prime Minister's Office Know About the $100 million sports rorts scandal prior to the 2018 election? Our commentators, as usual, Maggie Bathysphere and Big Bad Bastard Brian Plate.
Thanks, Shaun. Well, Wilma's not wasting any time this week as the mysterious invisible wood sprite. She is stealing into the PMO and is hacking into the email account with a password she mysteriously already knows.
Well, stealing into the office is a great expression, Mags, given that that's exactly what was done to taxpayers' money once whoever it was got in there and used it to buy votes.
And the email is sent by the invisible wood sprite and is received by Bridget McKenzie, who falls on her sword, conveniently placed there by whoever was responsible for directing her to do what she did in return for her silence as to the identity of whoever authorised the whole thing.
Scott Morrison.
Shaun.
Thanks, Mags. Well, if it's good enough for Google and Facebook to use news content from the ABC and SBS without them paying for it, then it's good enough for us. Here's SBS's Ricardo Gonzalez.
Shares of furniture retailer Nick Scali surged 14.5% today, with the company saying consumers have reallocated their spending into the home because they can't travel due to the coronavirus pandemic.
It's amazing, isn't it? Up until now, people have just been sitting around on the floor, such as their love for travel. Or maybe they just travel to places that have furniture. Nick Scali, of course, as you can see from these advertisements, make furniture for beautiful, young, single women who are self-isolating at home and have taken to dressing up a bit to keep their spirits up in these difficult but luxuriously comfortable times. And they're clearly loving being off the ground in all their finery instead of lolling about in dog hair and food scraps on a floor in a pair of tracky dacks and a filthy T-shirt. So good on you, Nick. Well, to naughtiness now, and
3 people have been charged after federal and state police intercepted a fishing boat allegedly filled with nearly $250 million worth of cocaine.
Acting Senior Sergeant Max Payne, that's a remarkable bust.
Yes, it's the pain-relieving steroids, I'm afraid. You do tend to bulk up in certain areas.
$250 million worth of cocaine?
I know what you're going to say, Shaun. Why can't people just enjoy a quiet day's fishing? Why must they take drugs to enhance every experience? Surely they can drop a line without doing a line.
Well, the $250 million worth, though, can't just be for personal use.
I think you're underestimating the relentless, mind-rotting tedium of fishing, Shaun. Sitting there hour after hour in extremes of weather, waiting for a brainless, stinking creature to get stuck on a tiny hook in an expansive ocean. $250 million of blow would barely get me through a day of that sort of unrelenting psychological torture.
Now, you're also getting people breaching lockdown restrictions to play Pokemon Go. Would they be considered exceptional circumstances?
Well, in terms of the unprecedented fuckwitity, yes, but we've responded to this problem by developing our own game, Shaun, entitled Pokemon Go to Jail, whereby players locate the virtual Pokemon at real-world prisons around the state, and as they capture them, we capture them.
And detain them?
At Her Majesty's pleasure.
Which is?
A G&T and a foot rub, I believe.
Well, as we know, Parliament resumed this week, but it's not just the usual question time antics keeping Liberal politicians busy, with reports that the Liberal Party is planning at least 3 fundraising dinners featuring appearances from Paul Fletcher, Simon Birmingham and Anne Ruston, and costing $2,500 a head. Dagby Mount, you're the Liberal Party Events Committee organiser. Is it a good idea to hold a big party fundraiser like this at the moment?
Oh, I suppose we could try and thin the crowd out by adding Stuart Robert to the speakers list, but then we'd have to raise the price of tickets to make up for the lost money, and then having Stuart on the bill would actually be a disadvantage because people aren't going to be encouraged to pay more when they could have come along for less and not seen him at all. So I think we should stick with the plan, $2,500 a head, run the very considerable risk of contracting COVID-19, but be absolutely guaranteed of not seeing or having to listen to Stuart Robert.
Well, it sounds like a very, very worthy cause, Digby, and best of luck with it.
And thank you, and you too, Shane.
But there's pressure on both sides of the political fence right now, which is presumably what's holding it up.
A senior Labor frontbencher has warned the party could end up splitting, saying it's struggling to be all things to all people.
It's actually struggling to be all things to more than about 34% of people at the moment. Labor leader Anthony Albanese, though, who'd clearly had a few, hosed down talk of a split.
From time to time, in a Democratic Party, people will put forward their views.
Not all the time, obviously. No one wants that. But occasionally some rogue element will express an opinion. So it seems Labor continues to grapple with the fallout from the last election.
It is obvious that Labor will not be able to form the next government.
The statement is true today as it was then. Later on in the show, I talk to Anthony Albanese's speech therapist about how this kind of internal division can't be good for Albo.
Oh, Shaun, don't be ridiculous. We are divided in government and now we're divided in opposition. If that's not consistency, I don't know what is.
Yeah, is the time right for a split? I mean, you're only a couple of seats away from government.
Oh, Shaun, I think we're a bit further away than that.
And for balance, I'll also be talking to Coalition spokesperson Fluffer Cologne.
Hang on. Chaos, disunity, Gillard, Rudd, Gillard, etc., etc. Here you go on.
No, this is about the Labor coalition.
Yeah, the coalition. Stable and secure economic managers.
No, the Labor coalition. You know, between a city-focused Labor Party and a regional-focused Labor Party.
Yeah, hang on. They'd be in direct conflict with each other. How's that going to work?
Well, the Liberals believe in the market and the Nationals believe in agrarian socialism. That seems to work out.
We have the formal internal process for managing our policy disputes.
Well, the voting public deserves to know what that is.
It'd just be like the secret coalition agreement you have with the Nationals.
I'll call you back.
Anyway, that's coming up later. That's not now. Also, I speak to someone about why the government's $250 million arts industry rescue package will take 3 more months for the money to become available. May as well be you're here.
Shaun, if these arty-farty types wanted their money sooner, they should have exercised some of their so-called talent and pretended their application was something the government actually wanted to fund. Like a women's change room in a marginal electorate.
Sorry, can we just cut to the chase?
What is the unit of mass for gemstones?
Carat.
Correct.
And then cut back. Thank you.
They get money to play dress-ups and we don't have to make believe we actually give a fuck about these PC snowflakes who, if we had our way, would be in a real job, like sawing wood or running a small business. And they'd have to do all their poncing about on the weekends, in their bedrooms, in front of their mirror, in their underwear and their mother's shoes, like the rest of us.
Well, if you're an Australian worried about not having any money to pay for things, you might be in luck, as millions of dollars of unpaid super are about to be paid into accounts as part of an ATO amnesty. It's a great idea, if she does say so herself, according to Assistant Minister for Superannuation Jane Hume.
This amnesty is a one-off chance for those people that may have underpaid superannuation to any of their employees since 1992, and most often that's inadvertent because superannuation is quite complicated to apply. So it gives them a chance to come forward, make good plus 10% to those employees and wipe the slate clean without any penalties.
Benina Puff from the Elephant's Foot Jardiniere in the corner of Jane Hume's office. I guess it can be hard to work out exactly how much super employees are owed, can't it?
Oh, so many forms to fill out. It really is complicated. I don't know blimmin' well who came up with these rules.
Well, Jane Hume's office, presumably.
So we thought that we wouldn't penalise businesses for what is presumably an honest mistake.
And this amnesty dates back to 1992.
Like Jane said in the clip.
And you didn't want to impose a cut-off date?
Oh, we could have done that, but that would just be unfair.
So when people are owed a debt like this, there should be a no-questions-asked scheme allowing the money to be paid back?
With interest.
As far back as possible without imposing an arbitrary cut-off date.
Exactly.
So then why is the government not planning to pay any robo-debt money that they owe prior to 2015?
That's a nice picture of Peter, isn't it?
Do you think? I'm not very happy with it. I mean, I think lockdown's getting to everybody.
Are you struggling to find purpose in life? Looking for a sense of relevance, some way of making a meaningful contribution instead of drifting through life? Welcome to our world.
Written, spoken and authorised very quickly.
It's a totally understandable series of grisly murders in Shrott, Hertfordshire this Sunday, as a completely reasonable person mows down all of these people, goes into the pub, turns the gun on this accordion player and then detonates the explosives strapped to his body, killing everyone here singing. Justifiable homicide with Candlebrat and McKenna, Sunday at 8:37.
Welcome back. Well, once this virus crisis is behind us, we can turn our attention back to other problems that pose an existential threat to humanity, like single-use plastic bags. But what are the alternatives? The paper bags we're using at the moment to have our food Ubered use much-needed trees. Telekinesis isn't real, and UFO tractor beams are really only practical for meat and dairy. Craig Rucastle was busy doing a real show, but our fictitious bump-free moo may have the answer.
Evadne Longbottom has been collecting string for most of her life. Every time she comes across any, she puts it in a drawer. Today, she has 43,000 kilometres of it, enough to stretch almost 1/9 of the way to the moon. But she has bigger plans.
I told her she should use it to fashion the world's 5th largest ball of twine, but she's a willful woman and knows her own mind, and that's why I love her. She has ambitions beyond those of mortal pride and cares not to see her name writ legible in the Book of Guinness. She wants to use her string in the service of world peace.
With single-use plastic bags no longer being offered free by many supermarkets, customers are angry, and the normally silent middle class have risen up.
We shall not be dictated to by corporate Australia. Are we living in Russia? No. Polyethylene is a natural byproduct of oil production, and without it we would need to vent the unused hydrocarbons into the atmosphere, warming the earth further and bringing about our own extinction, as the dinosaurs did before us. And yes, I know that without the extinction of the dinosaurs, we would have no oil to refine in the first place, and I'm sure that were they alive today, that irony would not be lost on them.
Evadne hopes her collection of string can be used to weave a signature line of multi-use string bags for people to use when they go shopping if they remember. She and her husband Larry are hoping for an injection of venture capital upwards of $20 to $30 million to build a prototype.
We were very excited when Evadne, and to a lesser extent Larry, pitched us this idea. We'd never heard of string, but apparently it's been around for ages, sitting for years in the drawers of the elderly, and is very much the last untapped, natural, non-renewable. And of course, because of this, we want in on its exploitation and plundering.
Mobil, Exxon and Shell have also joined as partners.
Now pay attention! This is the...
While the Sidebottoms get to work designing a string bag that will appeal to idiots who like something to put their groceries in while they push their shopping trolley across the car park to the rear of their SUV, their oil company confreres are clearing young growth rainforests along the Daintree River so that cotton can be grown instead to make more twine.
In the end, though, it has decided to make the string bags from cheaper to produce synthetic fibres derived from oil and coal. While just as environmentally unfriendly as single-use polyethylene plastic bags, they don't look it. And this gives us all peace of mind as we obliviously approach oblivion. Bumfrey Moo.
Well, not coming up because Rosehaven is on in a minute. Live exports suspended. And human impact on oceans worse than first thought. And finally, some great news for those in the pariah state of Victoria this week.
Melburnians are now allowed to drive to their local exercise spot.
Yeah, thank goodness for that, because who can be asked walking to an exercise spot? Goodbye.
Giant baby.